We're live on YouTube, or are we live now? Very good. Okay, welcome all to our council meeting this evening. We're going to begin with our roll call from our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present. Mayor Ritter is participating via Zoom.
And Councilmember Green's going to lead us this evening in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Just learn how to work this microphone button. Please rise. Put your hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Green. Now, in accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buena Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to the Buena Sanitation District Ordinance 2006-1. The audience is reminded that everyone, according to the Vista Municipal Code, members of the public are required to observe order and decorum at the meeting and conduct themselves in a courteous manner. The ordinance was adopted to allow for public input and facilitate city business without disruption of the meeting. Applause is appropriate for items listed under the presentation portion of the agenda only. To speak on an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item you want to speak on and give it to the clerk or secretary staff. Speaker slips are available just outside the council chambers. Speakers will have 3 minutes to address the city council. Next is our approval of the agenda, and for that, our city manager, Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There are no changes this evening to the agenda.
Okay, and we were in closed session earlier, and we'll go to our city attorney for a report of actions taken in closed session.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the council did meet in closed session to discuss the item on CS1 closed session agenda this evening. No action was taken that's required to be reported.
Okay, and next item is our consent calendar. The recommendations on the following calendar will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar. Any member of the public may remove an item by submitting a request to speak card to the clerk secretary. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered immediately following the adoption of the calendar. We have 16 consent items this evening, and we have two members of the council that would like to speak. Katie Melendez.
Could I please pull C4?
Item C4, and Councilman Joe Green.
I'd move to approve the balance of the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. And do we have any public speakers? Please cast your votes.
Mayor, what would you like to vote?
Oh, yes.
There we go. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and press your vote, and then your vote entered. We seem to be missing, it's not showing, actually. Go ahead and press yes on that one. There we go. Sorry, we're testing a new system.
Okay. That item passes unanimously.
May I clarify who seconded the motion? Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item C4.
Thank you. I wanted to pull this item because I had an opportunity to appoint a new senior commissioner as there was a vacancy in our senior commission. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Leah Proveno, who is in our audience, if you could stand for us. Unfortunately, we have to hold our applause during this time, but I'm giving you applause up here. And I just want to say thank you so much for stepping into this role. It is such a duty to fulfill a public service in this way. And you volunteered and you stepped up knowing that it was going to be really important. And I just want to say I appreciate you. And, I believe that we're all going to be happy to have you on our senior commission. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve item C4, which is my appointment of Leah Proveno to our Vista Senior Commission.
Thank you very much. Councilman Green?
I would like to echo the sentiments of my fellow council member here in thanking you for stepping up for your service, and I will second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Please cast your votes.
Mayor, how would you like to vote?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that item passes unanimously. Next, we have two discussion items on the agenda this evening. The first is D1, a shelter request for proposal and safe parking and camping. And our Assistant City Manager, Amanda Lee, is going to introduce this item.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Thank you and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and City Council members. At the January 25th City Council meeting, City Council discussed two separate items regarding homelessness and housing: advertising a request for proposal known as an RFP for year-round shelter, and establishing safe parking and/or safe camping in the city. At the meeting, staff was directed to advertise an RFP for a year-round shelter and was directed to research safe camping and safe parking and then return to City Council with recommendations. Over the last 3 months, staff has been engaged with various providers and agencies who dedicate resources to assist people experiencing homelessness, and through this engagement, staff has identified barriers with the city's current approach in regard to development of a shelter. In addition, staff has communicated with safe parking providers to better understand safe parking programs. For this evening's discussion, staff will provide a brief overview of the research and feedback concerning this year-round shelter, review staff's recommendation, and request direction regarding shelter options. Next, staff will provide an overview of safe parking and request direction regarding safe parking. Now I would like to introduce you to Sylvia Solis-Daniels, Housing Programs Manager, who will be leading the discussion.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. As Ms. Lee stated, on January 25th, Council discussed and reviewed a year-round shelter and operator request for proposal, and then directed staff to proceed with a revised proposal. On February 2nd, staff published an RFP for the development and operation of a year-round low-barrier shelter in Vista. The RFP was open for 8 weeks and closed on March 30th. No proposals were submitted. The RFP was monitored by 3 service organizations: Interfaith Community Services, Operation Hope North County, and Vista Community Clinic. Staff debriefed with each of the 3 organizations and received feedback explaining why the organizations did not respond to the RFP. Providers identified the lack of a site location. A location wasn't identified, and providers reviewed the list of city-owned parcels as well as available market properties and were not able to identify an adequate location. The other major hurdle for providers was funding. Without identified funding for acquisition and operation, this placed a significant burden on the applicant to identify, seek, and secure funding for shelter. Potential providers did note their interest in continuing a dialogue with the city to support the identification of an appropriate site for future partnerships. Additionally, staff spoke with other local jurisdictions and providers who did not apply to better understand why agencies did not pursue the RFP. One provider, Catholic Charities, noted their interest in a partnership to increase capacity of their current shelter. Staff also connected with other local governments and county to discuss the RFP and to get a better understanding of the county's upcoming shelter RFP and potential for partnership. The county did identify that they are interested in future partnerships and applications for funding opportunities. Other local jurisdictions provided insight on their RFP process and outcomes. The city of Oceanside and Chula Vista are currently in the process of developing shelters in their cities. Both agencies had identified their site prior to the RFP and were only seeking a proposal for the provider in these RFPs. After reviewing feedback from potential providers in other jurisdictions, staff recognized that the operation of a shelter for an organization of our size is not compatible with local standards. Jurisdictions that are in the process of opening their own shelters have access to a larger funding pool to sustain these projects. Additionally, while reviewing funding, staff has recognized that the city's housing funds could support the development of permanent supportive housing. The development of a shelter would address the same service population and provide long-term resources for people experiencing homelessness. This avenue also aligns with the goals of the city's strategic plan to address homelessness. The creation of permanent supportive housing is an industry-proven homeless intervention that's identified by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that combines affordable housing, assists with support services to address the needs of chronically homeless people. The HUD defines chronically homeless as an unsheltered individual with a disability who lives in a place not meant for human habitation or in an emergency shelter and has been homeless for at least 12 months. Creating permanent supportive housing is a long-term strategy to address chronic homelessness that is designed to build independent living that connects people with health care, treatment, and employment services. This strategy has proved to decrease the number of chronically homeless people, increase housing stability, and improve health outcomes. Permanent supportive housing has also been identified as a cost-effective solution to lower public costs associated with crisis interventions, including shelters, hospitals, jails, and other institutions. The city would partner with an affordable housing developer to create a sophisticated operating funding plan that would include an array of public funds to develop and sustain the project. City staff has experience working with affordable housing partners in creating successful affordable development projects. A permanent supportive housing development differs from other VISTA affordable housing as permanent supportive housing combines affordable housing with wraparound services to support people who are experiencing homelessness. Currently, VISTA does not have a permanent supportive housing development, nor an affordable housing development that prioritizing housing unhoused people. There is currently one project of permanent supportive housing in progress. The developer is in the final stages of developing or finalizing plans for the project, which is identified for seniors and veterans. A permanent supported housing development is a viable method to achieve long-term sustainability for people experiencing homelessness. A shelter, although a critical resource, is a temporary stopgap measure on the way to addressing homelessness. Next slide. Pictured on this slide is an example of a permanent supportive housing project in San Diego. This is just to give you an idea of what permanent supportive housing can look like. This is the Talmadge Gateway Project, which was developed by Wakeland Affordable Housing Development. This is just one example, as we mentioned. There are several affordable housing developers throughout the county in Southern California who are experienced in creating permanent supportive housing projects, and staff believes one of them would successfully respond to a permanent supportive housing RFP. Recognizing the barriers identified in the shelter RFP, staff recommends preparing a permanent supportive housing RFP that will include city funding, specifically housing funds, to financially support the project, as well as continue to pursue regional support and partnership opportunities for a North County shelter. At this time, Deputy Mayor, before we move on to the safe parking, we're looking for direction from City Council on permanent supportive housing, and therefore staff recommends taking public comments prior to receiving council direction.
I think that's a wise idea. Is that all right, Council? Okay, so we will begin with Teresa Smith, who's here tonight and has listed her group and organization, Dreams for Change. If you would step forward and address the council for 3 minutes. Oh, no problem. Thank you. We'll call on you then. Cindy Taylor with Operation Hope, did you want to speak at this time for 3 minutes?
Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening. I'd just like to say thank you to the City of Vista and all of you for your continuing support for our mission at Operation Hope North County. As we see the expanded needs of people who are experiencing homelessness, we would just like to confirm that for us, permanent supportive housing is a very important piece of the puzzle for people having the opportunity to become independent long-term. Our current program is high barrier, and we do have some dreams and plans to move into a low barrier program perhaps in the future. We have some identified land that we're interested in. Right now, we just didn't have the capacity to, or the bandwidth to properly apply for the RFP or to understand what long-term proper funding would look like. But we do see a fair amount of people that come into our program from their cars. When you're a family and you have children, you often don't identify that you're living in a car because you might be concerned that you could get into trouble with your children. So we think there is a need also for safe parking for situations with families. So again, thank you for your partnership and support, and we look forward to the new projects that are going to come along that are going to assist us and others in helping people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we'll go next to the council, Councilwoman Contreras.
I want to thank my coworkers on staff for continuing to investigate different solutions. And I also want to thank the public, Cindy Taylor, for your comments as well. I see this as a huge positive. This report indicates that, first, before I even get to that, I just want to say that I'm really proud of this council because we went through a lot of discussion and we took a stand and we said, you know what, we are serious here in the city of Vista about addressing the needs of those experiencing homelessness in our own backyards. These are community members that are struggling and that need help. And I am really, really proud of this council for taking the position that they did. In doing that, we were able to get information back. And the information that I see before me in regards to permanent supportive housing is best practices, right? I know that, it was even brought up in previous discussions when we were trying to formulate what a shelter might be like here in Vista, discussing congregate versus having private rooms. So I see this as a really good step in the right direction. At the end of the day, individuals who are experiencing homelessness, they need shelter, they need wraparound services, and we're in a position now to give direction to staff to say, yes, let's investigate permanent supportive housing. Housing is a human right, and I look forward to getting more information to see how and how quickly we can partner with someone, affordable housing developer, because the need is here. A lot of individuals who are in the shelter system that are, in different programs that are addressing their experience with homelessness, they get stuck in a place where there's not enough housing. So if we can be part of that equation for success. We definitely have a duty to do that. And I'm 100% in support of moving forward with permanent supportive housing here in the city of Vista. You know, I'm really glad that we have, a developer that came forward and has, 54 units in the pipeline right now. But the need is so much bigger than just 54. So thank you again for bringing this forward, and I am 100% in support of permanent supportive housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Councilman Joe Green.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Sylvia and Amanda, for your presentation, and thanks for meeting me and answering all my questions. I know I had a lot of them. I wasn't really sure what permanent supportive housing was defined as, how many units, what a chronic homeless, resident would be actually defined as well. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward to me so that I know. What it sounds like is that the initial RFP that we put out had so many stipulations and wraparound requirements that we couldn't necessarily get a proposal that encompassed everything that we were asking for in one thing. Is that correct? Pretty much. So what it sounded to me like after we spoke is that this is kind of breaking down our RFQ or RFP into different individual areas, and also changing the name of, instead of looking for a shelter, for actually looking for permanent supportive housing, which when I spoke with you, you guys defined this as the end goal, the end zone basically of if you are in a homeless shelter, this is where you want to be. And these are going to be non-communal living facilities. These are going to be either cabins or studios. I would assume that they're not going to be, communal, and it's going to be a permanent thing. No 2-year time frame or anything like that. Correct?
It's apartments, so that's what it
Even
is.
better than a cabin or a studio. Awesome. And I heard you say that it is also going to include wraparound services. I heard you say that permanent supportive housing is something that we use for people who are unsheltered with a disability that aren't currently in an acceptable environment for habitation, or someone who has been homeless for a documented period of 2 years. Is it an either or thing, or is it they have to encompass both? They have to be disabled and homeless for 2 years to get the permanent supportive?
They do. The HUD definition includes disability. But
Okay.
that can include an array of medical disabilities.
Okay, as far as mental or physical, it doesn't
Correct.
really matter? Okay, all right, so they will have a documented disability of some sort that at this particular housing facility, we will have services for them on site so that they're always taken care of from that aspect. Okay, and I was also told that the minimum number of units that a permanent supportive housing facility would be 50 units. Does that sound correct?
Well, I would speak in generalities. Basically, when you're looking at a funding source, to actually be competitive, you're looking at larger mass to be able to get funding. I pulled up supportive housing, and recently the ones have been like 84 units.
Okay.
There's been 101. There are some that are 37, 42, but you're looking for more of a multi-family housing that can range.
Of course, and my concern was if I go for an RFP for permanent supportive housing, is this something that's going to trickle into residential neighborhoods? Is this a thing of where, hey, 5 bedrooms is 5 units and we can put that anywhere and not disclose what it is per se? And it sounds like that's definitely not the type of facility this is. This is a large facility that is going to have great services and service a lot of residents that are unsheltered. Is there any way, and I always ask this, to ensure that we're serving Vista's residents? I mean, I know that Deputy Mayor Franklin and our 2 council members here were part of the point in time count, and they know the residents that are living on the streets, and we do have chronically homeless residents within our, city limits here. Is there a way to make sure that we're actually servicing those residents, or do the feds say you have to service all residents from all areas that apply for this type of housing? And a follow-up question to that is, do we know how many people that is? Because do I need to build 200 permanent supportive housing units for my disabled population? Is there 1,000 people in Vista waiting for it? Like, how many is right? Knowing that we're building 54 now for seniors and veterans, and mind you, we have a young population, so I assume we need some for people 25 to 35 or under as well. But, what is that? So answer those, and then I have more.
Sure, I'll start with the Coordinated Entry System, CES, is what would be utilized to place people in housing.
Okay.
And it would take anybody entered into the Coordinated Entry System. So it could be people that aren't currently homeless in Vista. We can, however, have a preference. There is a preference section that we could identify for the development to, when they're doing the initial application process for new residents, have a priority preference for applications for people who are experiencing homelessness in Vista.
But there's no way to put an overlay where we say, hey, at least 40% of the people in this place have to have come from Vista or anything like that?
There's a fair housing violation with that. So people have a fair right to live where they want to live.
I gotcha.
And so you can't restrict it. We only want Vista living in Vista.
I get you, but the whole purpose of us doing a strategic plan to address homelessness is to address homelessness within Vista. So if I'm taking, say I build 200 residents and I'm taking 190 residents from Escondido and Carlsbad and 10 from Vista, that's not doing what I'm trying to do. So it's unfair, it sounds like, that they could restrict that, because as a government body, we're trying to make an impact in our city, not necessarily in the county. Not that our sister cities don't matter, but the problem lies within our city limits that we're all contacted about. So I don't know how we can ensure that other than the...
Well, like Sylvia said, we can do a preference, and we do that for all of our affordable housing developments, is we do a preference. And before we come back, we haven't done the research, but we can definitely see, because we do put preferences, how many of them actually are Vista residents in there. So you can kind of look at the data, and also look at North County.
Perfect.
Because research and expert knowledge tells you that people who live in San Ysidro don't want, if they get affordable housing, or even if they're homeless in San Ysidro, don't want to move to North County because they're not familiar. So I would probably say that North County will serve a majority of North County, but that's not to say that it's going to be all Vista or that others can't come, but we'll get you more statistics.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that data would be good. We've put out some affordable housing projects, our veteran artist project, our senior project, that are brand new projects. We've had technology. We should have the data. If we had a resident preference on those properties, what does that look like? Is it 40%? Is it 30%? And then in the other cities, are they doing the same tracking where they say, hey, we're servicing only 30% of our residents too? So I'd like that data, because I would really like to make an impact here in the community. So that's that. Let's see, permanent supportive, coordinated entry system. Thank you for that. All right, so we had barriers. We're not talking about safe parking yet. Just want to make sure that I understand your recommendation, because once we're all done, I would like to make it, because I think that is a good recommendation to make. What it sounds like to me is that our previous RFP wasn't as palatable for people, and what we need to do is define a funding source for it. And if we change it to be permanent supportive housing instead of a homeless shelter, there's more funding sources available. Additionally, that allows us to spend some of our affordable housing money and partner with a developer in order to get this accomplished. And if we make this recommendation, we're much more likely to get some proposals that could actually do what we want to do. Is that correct? So the proposal, or the recommendation, is that we pursue an RFP or RFQ for a permanent supportive housing solution. What does this say? Define a portion of the city's funds to assist in this project, which I would assume would come from the Affordable Housing Fund. Do we need to put a number on that, or will you come back to us and say, hey, this is how much you have, this is what we recommend we allocate for the RFP?
We don't necessarily need a number from you for that. What we are proposing to do is identify for developers that will have support for their gap. So whatever gap they identify in their funding package.
We want to let them know we already have those funds there.
Correct.
Just to be clear, we still have no location, right?
Correct.
We don't have a location. We don't know where this is built. We don't know how they're going to do it. We don't know how we want them to do it. We're just saying, hey, this is more direction on where to go, more direction on the funding source. Help us help our community, correct? Perfect.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I think I understand. I'd like to hear from my council members.
I wanted to jump in with a question, which is I'm also concerned about the assessment of need in our community for the services. I know that the need exists, but I'm concerned about the quantification of it, and I believe that we should endeavor to quantify the need before we endeavor to ask the question, answer the question, what would be an appropriate response to that need. I'd like to know what other cities in the county, particularly our neighbors on the 7-8 corridor, have done as far as supplying this type of housing product, so that we can understand how what we're presently offering or not offering compares with our neighbors. And I'd like to understand a little bit better about the life cycle of a resident, how someone moves to the shelter and then to permanent supportive housing. Because my understanding is we wouldn't be moving, so our social worker wouldn't be taking somebody directly from the street to the permanent supportive housing. They would still be making a stop at the shelter. Is that right?
No, they could move directly from an unhabitable space into permanent supportive housing, depending on whatever the end result of this proposal looks like. There could be all vouchers. So there could be emergency housing vouchers, BASH vouchers available to an individual, and they could be going from the street straight into that housing.
Okay. I think one of the big concerns and one of the reasons I think we need to talk about quantifying the problem is because the project that we're just finishing on Santa Fe, that was 59 affordable units, was completely full prior to occupancy permit. I have a feeling that this would be a very similar situation where the demand is much greater than the supply, and therefore probably we'd still, we could probably build quite a bit of this product and not begin to, supply all the need. So I think then the question is, what kind of partnerships do we have with the county and with our neighboring cities to make sure that we're working in lockstep with them to all cooperatively supply a supply of this type of housing that's equivalent to the need in our cities? You have any thoughts on that?
So in December, it was in 2021, I believe it was late 2021, the county did release an RFQ to actually solicit providers as well to build permanent supportive housing. And for partnerships through HomeKey. They received a lot of applications and they're funneling through those. So the county is looking to bring those on board. It does take a while. Oceanside is currently developing permanent supportive housing, as well as Escondido. So that is something that's happening. Earlier, there was a conversation of how much permanent supportive housing there is. It was kind of, Sylvia and I were not able to get all the data as quickly as we were hoping, so we hope to get you more data. But just based off of the point in time count from last year, at the time, on that one particular night, excluding the city of San Diego, there was 547 permanent supportive housing rooms with apartment units within the entire county, again, excluding city of San Diego, and 528 of them were occupied that evening. So it is less, there's a less than 1% vacancy rate, or 19 beds for that particular night. So it kind of gives you a little bit of like understanding of where the county is as a whole with permanent supportive housing. City of San Diego does have more than that, but we excluded those numbers and their data was a little bit more hard to funnel.
Do we know what the quantity of the waiting list was countywide?
We haven't been able to look into this. Okay. This was just kind of like quick data that we did want to be able to provide you with something.
And then you said something when we met yesterday that I thought was very important to bring out in public, which was you said that the RFP and the congregate shelter model, which is what we have with Haven House and La Posada, is no longer best practices, and a lot of service providers are not looking to build that type of a model any longer. Could you, for the benefit of the community, could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So as we began our initial discussion and research of permanent or of shelters, we initially did a scope of what's available, and the congregate model is the most common resource. There's an economy of scale in utilizing that model. But as we continued the discussion and research, we've found that funders are no longer in support of solely congregate models. There's a lot of interest and investment in a more boutique style of service where it's individual spaces for the clients. So that was evident in Chula Vista's service model style. They're moving forward with 8x8 structures, individual, 63 of those structures for individuals. But Oceanside is moving forward with a congregate model.
And then additionally, we had conversations with the County of San Diego, and the county was supposed to release their RFP for shelter just right after ours. However, they've decided because of new mainstream look into congregate shelters, they're holding back, and they'll probably release one at the end of the year, and it'll probably look more non-congregate.
I really wonder if it's possible to build our way out of the need with this type of a product. I mean, with the congregate model, obviously the costs are much more in line with providing a service to a much larger number of people. So if you're telling me that we're abandoning the congregate model, then what we're going to be doing is spending orders of magnitude more money to serve an order of magnitude fewer people. And that should be concerning because there's a lot of people in need. And I think also, and we really have not had a conversation as a council, but I think we need to. The governor's out talking since 2020 in his State of the State speech. And in March of this year, he made a major communications push talking about how do we help individuals who aren't able to, because of an impairment, to accept the help that we're offering. And I think that's really important. We have individuals who've, presented a present danger to themselves moving through traffic on Santa Fe at Civic Center. We have one gentleman, is it more than 20 or more than 40 times that we've intervened in that circumstance for that one person. We do have some individuals in the city who clearly do not have the ability to make good decisions about their own health and welfare, and they're not going to make a decision to go either to the shelter or to a wraparound supportive housing product. They really need a higher level of service and assistance. And I've spoken to our city attorney's office about that and about how we might act as a city through the Lanterman Petrus Short Act. That's a conversation I'd like to bring back to the council and for us to discuss more, because none of these types of solutions is going to be a fit for everyone. And we need to be pursuing all of the solutions at once. That way, everybody with every different kind of need is met. Next, Councilwoman Katie Melendez.
There we go. Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Amanda and Sylvia, for bringing forward the details about this discussion. I'm very pleased that we've come all this way. When we first started discussing a shelter, we had very different views of what that was going to look like. I know for myself, I had mentioned how valuable a shelter or living arrangement would be for someone experiencing homelessness that is more individualized, that gives them space to develop their autonomy and therefore become more healthy members of our community. So it's really great to see, right, that in the investigative process, our city staff has come to the conclusion that the best way for us to move forward is going to be investing in a model that is more sustainable. And yes, it will serve less individuals. And I am not as concerned about that because I do believe in the effectiveness of permanent supportive housing. I know that it can entirely eliminate recidivism for many individuals. And it allows, like I mentioned, an opportunity for people to regain their autonomy. And this is where, I know that myself and Deputy Mayor Franklin disagree regarding conservatorship and other methods of engaging with people who are experiencing mental health crises and homelessness. I think that permanent supportive housing is kind of the no-brainer solution that has a cost associated for housing, for the actual place where people live, and also carries the cost of those mental health and social services that are going to ultimately allow someone to be autonomous. And my goal and interest in advocating for the community is helping to develop policies and programs that can empower people to live a better life. And during my time providing social services, a lot of the conversations I would have with individuals, they would tell me that all they want to be able to do is to take care of themselves. And the ability to do that is really hard when you have trauma from the street. So providing permanent supportive housing addresses that housing need and provides that structured service so that eventually these individuals will have an opportunity to integrate back into our community, to even become working members of our society once again. And it's because of the chronicity of someone's homelessness that requires them to have a higher level of need. So for the individuals that would be highly eligible for this kind of housing program or housing product, permanent supportive housing, it's going to be people who are chronically homeless, who do reject other resources for a multitude of reasons, but it's going to meet their need and it's going to be very successful for them. Being able to serve a broad amount of people is going to be very impossible to do through a housing product alone. That's why it's going to be really important, in addition to having permanent supportive housing, it's going to be very important for our social worker and future contracted social services as a city that we can hopefully expand, that our social worker is providing a strategic outreach effort so that the people that do have those chronic experiences and would be most eligible for this kind of housing product in the city of Vista are able to be reached by our social worker, integrated into the regional task force database, and given a greater opportunity to actually access these resources. So I agree that it's not just a matter of providing the housing service that's going to make us successful in, addressing homelessness and perhaps even resolving homelessness for many people in our community, but it's going to be the multitude of efforts that we take. Having this resource in the community is going to be of very high value, even if it'll be of a smaller scope. So I'm very supportive of this. I had previously recommended that we look at our state housing funding and identify what funds could be used for permanent supportive housing instead of some of our other programming. Because I believe permanent supportive housing, does meet that middle ground between retaining someone's autonomy and giving them an opportunity to integrate back into our community. And with that, I don't have a lot of questions, but I just want to say thank you so much. Up here, we have our ideals and we have our vision, but it's not our way or the highway. At the end of the day, staff was able to look at all of the information available and come to a conclusion that permanent supportive housing is going to be the most effective and the most staff-friendly approach that we could take as a city. And as a city, one of our most valuable resources is our staff's time and, work on these kinds of projects and goals. So thank you very much for everything that you've done. It's a great example of staff taking direction and kind of, taking us into a different way. And it's not a yes or a no in my mind, right, about the shelter. It's just that we're going in a different direction. And I feel really excited about that. So I don't have any further questions. I'd like to hear from everyone else. And I think I saw that the mayor also raised her hand. So thank you.
Yes, forgive me, Mayor, I don't know how long you had your hand raised, but we'll recognize you next, Mayor Ritter.
That's okay. I'm getting this figured out here. So my questions, I guess, are, is this a low barrier? Will this be a low barrier, permanent supportive housing? And will there be like 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom, apartments? Will it include children? And then will it also, bring pets? And then I want to know if it's low barrier, then if alcohol and drug abusers are still allowed and not tested or anything. So those are kind of my questions for it.
Sure. This would be a low barrier facility. Individuals would have to be housing ready, and depending on the final product of whatever that development looks like, we could then determine whether we wanted to have a focus on families or individuals, and that would also impact the makeup of the development. Typically, permanent supportive housing is, it comes for all different groups of people, families, individuals, but a majority of it that you do see is for individuals. But it's not to say that there aren't products available for families and couples, which would allow pets as well.
So, and are they still, would they allow like people that are on drugs and alcohol abusers? Are they allowed, if they're not, I know they're not allowed on the premises, but are they allowed to be under the influence and live there?
Sure. So you would want to kind of think about the project as any other apartment building. And the idea is that we develop something that looks like another apartment building and structure in the city. So whether or not people are utilizing whatever they're doing in their apartment, we're not able to say yes or no of whether or not they're doing drugs or consuming whatever. But what I can say is to maintain that voucher and that place in the apartment, people do have to meet guidelines, particularly if they have a Section 8 or a HUD-backed voucher. There will be requirements for them. So that concept of active drug use, people may be in recovery when they move into the facility, but there are going to be limitations and requirements for them to maintain their voucher and their housing status.
And also, as Sylvia stated, it is an apartment, so there are rental agreements. So you do have to, you can't be a nuisance, continuing nuisance. So you can't have 15 pets or animals. Typically, when you live in an apartment, you're restricted to the number of animals you have or the size or pounds. So it's not bring in your 50 pets and that's okay because that's my need. There's always restrictions when you're living in an apartment.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Next is Councilwoman Contreras.
All right, I'm back. I think this has been a really good conversation that we're having regarding this new direction for permanent supportive housing. Understanding that, there needs to be wraparound services and that this might be a building that's a little bit taller to accommodate all those units, right? What's the current zoning like? Do we have zoning that's, by right permissible for this, or would that be something that the council would have to address with the special use permit, or what's the lay of the land when it comes to zoning in this?
It's just regular apartments, so it would be multi-use, residential, wherever apartments can go. So the city has zoning for it. And permanent, then just because we're adding on the name permanent supportive doesn't alter the zoning in any way.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there was clarity there. And when it comes to our affordable housing funds, I can't remember the exact number. Is it $250,000 that we receive annually in affordable housing funds? I know there's a reoccurring amount.
No, we don't receive any reoccurring. Are you talking about for the strategic plan to address homelessness? You're allowed, out of affordable housing dollars, you can spend up to $250,000 on services for homelessness. All other funds have to go for affordable housing, and it's permanent housing, whether it's permanent supportive or just regular permanent affordable housing. We have all of our money is basically from old redevelopment dollars. We're not accruing any funds at this point, and so we do have it's with between $6 to $8 million within the fund, if I were going off the top of my head.
Sure. And understanding that we have not really any money coming in. However, this does intersect with the discussion that we're having on inclusionary housing, because if we never, one, were to have gotten rid of inclusionary housing, and there was some kind of in lieu fee, that in lieu fee would be going towards the housing fund. Is that correct? So we could potentially have another source of funds for permanent supportive housing if we were to have inclusionary housing in the city of Vista. So, there's just so much fruit that we haven't been able to grasp. But I hope that with the seeds that we're planting, we're going to be able to reap those in the future. So I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about affordability, when we're talking about economic opportunity and the ability to be secure with housing, we do have a huge need here just in the San Diego region. Our housing costs are astronomical. To supply the need of affordable housing, I mean, if we really want to tackle that question, then we need to advocate for a higher living wage across the board. In lieu of of not doing that, then we should take a look at what we can actually do right here, right now, and that's to say yes to permanent supportive housing, and to say yes to different ways to fund it. Now, there was a question brought up that permanent supportive housing would be more costly than a shelter model. However, just looking at the current permanent supportive housing that's going to be going up in District 1, 54 units. For those 54 units, approximately how much is it that the city is going to provide to have those units built? Is there a figure, a guesstimate?
The staff is currently in discussions with the provider. The provider was awarded funding, and based off their funding model, there's not, at this point, it doesn't look like a need for city funding, but there is an opportunity for the city to possibly engage and be a partner in the project. And we're currently evaluating those, and we'll be meeting with the developer, and we haven't received their exact ask. That's something we'll be receiving shortly.
And that's the GAP funding that you brought up.
Typically, it's a GAP funding, and we do an analysis through a pro forma. This case might be a little bit different because there may not be a GAP. So we'll have to take a look at what options are available.
So is this kind of like a one-off example, an anomaly, or if we were to say yes to permanent supportive housing, is there the potential that we could actually address building units to help those experiencing homelessness without having to provide a ton of upfront money or back-end money?
We're in a unique time right now where there's a lot of funding out there for this type of housing. There's over-the-counter through No Place Like Home. There's the county has this innovative housing trust fund where they're doing housing. There's Home Key, and then there's also tax credits. So if you combine all these different options of funding sources together, the more public funding you receive, the higher your application goes for tax credits. So that's where the funding from the local agency happens is, so right now, like I'm saying, this national, the project that's coming forward, they could be funded without us, and there's a lot of those opportunities probably, but where our funding can really be used is to help them with their tiebreaker score so they can get that tax credit. So then we don't have to wait, and tax credit rounds happen twice a year, and it comes to everyone rates at 100%, and then it comes down to a tax break. And that's really kind of like you want a sweet spot of where your tax break goes, or tiebreaker, goes. And so that's where our public money helps with their tiebreaker score. And that's what you're kind of looking for when you're talking to a developer.
Okay. So this is an emergency situation.
on many fronts. It's an emergency situation for our community because people don't want to continue to see people struggling to live outdoors. It's an emergency because if we don't act fast enough on this council with saying, yes, we want to embrace permanent supportive housing, then it may in fact cost us more in the future. So it sounds like we're at a crossroads where the answer is very clear to me. And I would say that to a lot of the community. It's very clear that we have an exceptional opportunity to move forward and make a real difference for those experiencing homelessness by embracing permanent supportive housing. And, you know, I differ with Governor Newsom on conservatorship, but even if that were to go through, eventually someone's going to need to live somewhere. So if there is conservatorship, you know, in the future, would the permanent supportive housing tie into that? Or is that not communicated yet enough? I don't know where we're at on, I know conservatorship has come up with Todd Gloria and the governor. I don't know how supportive people are of conservatorship, seeing that there are other strategies that we can pursue. But, you know, looking at contemporary issues and seeing, hey, if this is something that we end up embracing as a state, how does permanent supportive housing fit into that conversation, if at all?
Well, it really kind of just depends on the individual. If they were defined as chronic homeless while they were under conservatorship, and then what's the avenues of their funding sources? Would they qualify for the permanent supportive housing under a voucher? And then what supportive care are they receiving? Would they be a candidate for this type of supportive housing? What level is it at? Those would be the things that would be taken into consideration. Did you have anything else?
It's very unique to every individual's needs. So depending on whatever final product we come up with or a developer comes up with, it may include an array of different voucher styles or service model styles.
Right, so if there was an exchange of ideas here on the council where conservatorship becomes like, hey, this is the one tool that we're going to utilize to make sure that people are off the streets. At the end of the day, people are going to have to live somewhere. So even if we decided that that was the right thing to do and to support that type of legislation, which I'm not in favor of that, but even if there was a majority that said that, this isn't a permanent supportive housing isn't going to detract from this other conversation that's happening. So they could actually dovetail one another, is what I'm hearing. And that we could actually have a mechanism where we're getting more money for affordable housing. We're able to utilize that to build these units or to do a tiebreaker. You know, maybe the tiebreaker is $1 million or less. I mean, that is a huge return on investment for our taxpayers here in the city of Vista, who they have told us this is a problem and you need to figure out how to address it. So I just wanted to ensure that we had kind of a little bit more background on where we would get these funds and how we could use them. And let me see here. I think I may have asked all my questions. So, are you looking for a motion on this particular?
I believe Councilmember Green has made a motion. I don't believe there's a second at this time.
Is there?
I was going to be up next to officially make the motion, but she.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry. No.
I just want to make sure I was clear on what the motion
okay.
should
Sorry,
be, and it sounds like it was excellent, so that's good.
Okay. Can the motion that is on the floor be restated?
Yes, the motion that I had proposed was that we instruct staff to pursue an RFP or RFQ for a permanent supportive housing development and define a portion of the city's funds to assist in this project. And I'm not putting an actual portion on there, but again, that was the motion.
And Councilmember Green, I just want to clarify because in some of the comments, you indicated that you would maybe want to have a priority or a preference for permanent supportive housing. Is that something that would be tagged onto this motion or something that we would address in the future?
I don't want to make it a requirement of the RFP, but I would like staff to maybe notate it in the RFP that a, require or a, resident occupancy preference would be, possibly, part of that. If I don't know.
And that is a discussion we have after when we're doing the development agreement. That is something we include in all of our developments for any type of affordable housing.
Okay, sounds good. Since I am hogging the mic here, I'm just going to go ahead and second the motion on the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I just want to jump in with a thought here. I didn't intend for a moment to offer the idea that it was one or the other with regard to a shelter or permanent supportive housing. I very much recognize that people who are in the shelter need a place to go so that they can exit the shelter and have a permanent place to live. So I'm 100% with you on that. And I recognize that if somebody had a conservatorship, they would need a place to go. So, and I absolutely agree. And I know that there's a lack of housing that's attainable for those who are in the most and greatest need, which is why I think it's really important for us to begin this process with, as much as we can, a analysis of the need and the question of the council: what is our vision for the next decade or 15 years to provide these services? How much of the need do we feel that we need to meet? How much of the need do we want to ask our neighboring cities to meet? What kind of partnerships do we want to build with the county? I think it's important, no agency should shoulder all the burden by themselves. So I just think that's an important conversation to have. I support the motion. My understanding of the motion is we're giving direction to staff to bring back a written RFP, and we're going to probably have an opportunity as a council to give some input on that RFP and give a final approval to it. With that, I will recognize Councilman Joe Green.
Thank you so much, sir. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm glad the motion was awesome, and it's first and second, so when we vote, that's going to be awesome. But I just wanted to clarify a few notes that I took. Number one, from a homelessness solution standpoint, this is a one-time charge for the city. Like in the event we have to give gap funding of $1 million or $2 million or whatever that is, the recurring beds that we pay for, 10 a month at $100,000 a month or whatever, 20 a month, 200,000 a month, whatever that is, this isn't a recurring charge. This is a one-time shot, and it could possibly, be 50 beds for 20 years for one-time shot, correct? So from a cost standpoint, this could save us money, right? And then the other thing, Madam Mayor was kind of mentioning as far as the apartment living, there will be like particular CCNRs for every development, conditions, covenants, and restrictions to maintain the integrity of the community. I think no on-site drug use, no indoor smoking, stuff like that is probably gonna be in there, but each developer will have the ability to make whatever their own stipulations are. But I definitely think there should be some CCNRs just from like a, maintenance standpoint. And I think it sounds like that's always the case. We don't need to reinvent that wheel. And then the last question that I had was, do we know what the percentage of our unsheltered population is that is considered to qualify for this program, to actually have the disabilities or that are considered chronically homeless? Like what percentage of our homeless qualify for this?
So we asked our social worker that exact question.
Okay.
And anecdotally, she estimates that 85% of the population.
Okay, so this is servicing the population that we need to service, the population that's rejecting services now because it's temporary and because it isn't an end to their struggles. So this is actually us offering an end to the struggles to 85% of the homeless, and hopefully the other 15% that aren't struggling are accepting other types of services. So you've answered all my questions. We seconded. I see Councilmember Melendez here. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Contreras, and Melendez for all your input.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councilwoman Melendez.
Thank you very much. I have one question and one comment. So last week I attended the San Diego Housing Federation's conference, and there was a portion where they talked about fair housing laws and these deed restricted units, right? Affordable housing, permanent supportive housing. And from that conversation, my understanding is that we can have a local preference, right? But there's a way that it has to be framed, specifically local versus Vista, in order to, like, be accommodating to fair housing.
You can always have a preference, but you can't make it you can't make it a requirement. So it's a difference.
Okay, perfect. And then I also wanted to ask about the deed restriction, because we're talking about, down the road. And my understanding is that these types of units are deed restricted for like 55 years. So do we know what the deed restriction would look like for permanent supportive housing at
It would depend on the funding sources. Tax credits are always 55 years. However, if they get county money or some other funding sources, they require 99 years. So it would range between 55 to 99.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for answering that. This is just giving me, a better understanding of what the lifetime of this experience looks like for an individual. And I want us to remember that people having these experiences, they are individuals. They're, not necessarily like a pack of a monolith of, a group that we want to just address as a whole. I think you've touched on this, that it's on a case-by-case basis. It's very suited to the individual. And so when I think about a 55-year, 90-year deed-restricted apartment for someone who's experiencing chronic homelessness, I know that that's going to serve more than one individual in terms of the lifetime of a person, especially someone who has experienced chronic homelessness, who has a shorter lifespan because of that trauma. So I think that, thank you for the information about the deed restriction. It definitely puts a perspective on what the timeline is for the use of this kind of housing model. And I think it's appropriate to go to a vote now. Thank you so much for the time.
Madam Mayor, do you have any more comments? Okay. The last thing I wanted to say that I probably should have said first is I just want to make sure that we continue the conversation with Operation Hope, with La Posada, with Interfaith, about how we can help them expand the services that are available to those that are suffering from homelessness here, because what I was maybe inarticulate in saying is they have a numerical capability to provide service offerings that is important. And while it is only a way station to get where we want people to arrive, which is permanent housing, that way station is very important and it is needed. And we need a place where folks can, where they can recuperate and get back on their feet and on their way to a permanent housing program. And oftentimes, a stay in the shelter is a beginning place for folks, especially when there usually are shelter beds available, but not always. And they're probably, as soon as we build 100 units, they will, or 80 units or 50 units, whatever it is, they will likely be 99% full immediately. So it's not like we're going to have a big bank of places to put folks when they need to go there. It's, I just want to stay aware of that. And with that, Councilmember Melendez, did you have anything else? Or?
No, I don't know why I did
Okay.
that.
Okay, very good. Then we'll proceed to a vote. Madam Mayor, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Okay, that motion carries unanimously, and that'll take us to the next half of item D1.
Next slide. On January 25th, council directed staff to review safe camping and safe parking, and then to return back to city council with recommendations for a future meeting. During the last few months, staff has visited and met with safe parking providers, as well as many of you, and researched safe camping and safe parking service options. Safe parking provides safe and legal overnight parking environment for individuals and families that are dwelling in their vehicles. This resource offers supportive services, including case management and assistance to stabilize lives and transition people back into housing. Basic needs resources, including restrooms, hand washing stations, and hygiene supplies, are also provided. There are 2 providers in San Diego County who currently provide safe parking programs: Dreams for Change and Jewish Family Services. Both providers offer similar program parameters and eligibility requirements and serve an average of 25 to 35 individuals or vehicles at each location. Included on the slide is a program participant from Jewish Family Services program in 2019. The primary program participant for both providers are employed single adults, most of whom are older adults who are new to experiencing homelessness. There are also some families, including those who are actively fleeing domestic violence, as well as older adults. Most participants are experiencing homelessness for the first time and are underemployed. Most clients are struggling with housing affordability and unexpected financial hardships. Safe parking programs are designed to create a resource for people who have the capacity to secure housing through case management and benefit enrollment assistance. Included on this slide was a photo of participants from Dreams for Change from 2018. The San Diego Housing Federation conducted a review of homeless services amongst providers and participants and identified priorities for an ideal safe parking or sleeping site. The top priorities identified include location. It's imperative that location not be in a high crime area and near other resources, including transportation corridors. Services that are recommended to have are full-time security, counseling and case management, as well as internet access. The physical amenities that are recommended are to include good lighting, fencing that's either a natural barrier or a physical fence, restrooms which can be portable, hand washing stations, level and paved ground, as well as charging ports. The safe parking program has an estimated annual cost of up to $250,000. Much of the annual cost is direct staff expenses for case management and security resources. The current programs in San Diego County are funded through a homeless housing assistance and prevention, also known as HAP grants, offered by the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. The county's continuum of care, which comes through the State of California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency funds. At this time, RTFH has allocated all funding. However, a new round of funding is pending, and there may be an opportunity for a provider to apply for funding to establish safe parking in Vista. Next slide. If council directs staff to proceed with safe parking, staff recommends that council approve the use of general funds to support the cost of a safe parking program if grant funds are not available. We're recommending to proceed as well with community forums to begin public education and discussions concerning a safe parking program. And then following public forums, staff would return to council with feedback and a proposed location. At this time, staff is not recommending council to identify a location for safe parking. Staff will determine the best location and take into consideration feedback from the public forums and service provider recommendations. If council directs staff to proceed with safe parking, staff will return to council with a proposed location and an RFP to publish for a service provider. Staff did not recommend proceeding with the safe camping program. After evaluating and reviewing what safe camping programs looked like, there are none currently offered in the County of San Diego. The one that was offered was in response to the hepatitis A outbreak in 2017, and it was only an interim space that was established by the City of San Diego. It was operated by Alpha Project and was used as a temporary solution until an emergency sprung structure was established. This concludes the presentation of D1, and we're available for questions and comments.
Thank you very much. And we have a member of the public that would like to make a comment, Teresa Smith with Dreams for Change.
Hello, council members. Thank you for taking the time to listen. As mentioned, my name is Teresa Smith, and I'm the CEO and founder of Dreams for Change. I do really appreciate the efforts that the city is taking up this endeavor of addressing homelessness. After listening to supportive housing, support, that's definitely the way to go, and that's what is needed. But and looking at these options such as safe parking and safe camping, and once again, the assessment of safe camping, it kind of holds true as what we found too. But as for safe parking, we've seen the value of what it brings. After operating safe parking now for 12 years, a little over 12 years now this month, and seeing the thousands of individuals that's come through our program and seeing how we've prevented them from ending up in the shelters, prevented them from being chronic by using that asset of that vehicle is the reality is for us, it's how do we take that asset and keep them moving forward? Because we know that's what they need to get to work, get to school, and access those resources. And safe parking has been a proven model that's cost-effective and can be that stopgap. But as mentioned, even the location's always been the issue. Where do we find, great locations for these that is accessible to the highway system so they can get to the jobs and not buried in where gas is, through the roof right now and unaffordable. The services are key, having those services to be able to get them connected to those resources, because once again, oftentimes this is their first time accessing these resources that they're very unaware of and how to navigate these systems. And what I wanted to kind of mention is that, we are happy to help as, community conversations hopefully do occur, to come out and help educate. Like I said, 12 years has brought a lot of knowledge and experience about what works, what doesn't work, and how communities respond. I really look forward to seeing this take shape here in Vista and to see you guys continue to lead this effort around homelessness. It's very encouraging as a service provider watching us over the years to see Vista really step up in the region. I'm excited to see it. So thank you guys and gals.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councilman Joe Green.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And thank you guys again for your presentation. I was initially opposed to safe parking lots, and it had a lot to do with me not knowing what a safe parking lot was and what type of services they offer and what the focused impacts were and what the requirements were for actually sleeping in a safe parking lot and actually obtaining a space within a safe parking lot. Once I was educated on that a little bit more and I went and visited the safe parking lot out in Encinitas, I realized the focused impacts that I was worried about had already been addressed in different areas, and that given the requirements to stay in these parking lots and the knowledgeable community that utilizes this particular avenue of parking lot, that there isn't a random car that pulls in every day or a line of cars waiting outside, and all the stipulations that I thought, were going to affect the community. When I went and visited this facility, it was actually run extremely nice. It was well maintained. There wasn't a whole lot of services there aside from a restroom and a wash basin. And there were social workers on site who visited the cars and offered them different services. And I thought that was a great service. I also like the fact that they came in after a certain time at night and they were vacated the parking lot early enough in the morning where there was no focused impact on the community. So the education that I received on the safe parking lot was super, enlightening. So thank you for taking me out there and helping me ask all of my questions. The question I think that we all would have is, where is this going to be? And by allowing the RFP to go out, the servicers would basically present us with options for locations. I don't have any ideal locations, but in speaking with you guys, it sounded like what we need to do is basically authorize staff to go out for an RFP and define a source of funding and allocate a particular number or tie like a number to that funding. Is that correct? Like you want us to give you a number that we want you to?
Yeah, and we're looking, because kind of lessons learned
Yes.
from our shelter RFP,
Yeah.
that it would be prudent of us to go ahead and include some funding source in there, but also with the caveat of knowing that we're going to pursue grant funding.
Yes.
So there is a lot of money out there that there's going to be the regional task force on the homeless, RTFH, will be releasing an RFP later on, and this could be an eligible source. So there's other opportunities, but we do want, as a fallback mechanism, to include something to say, hey, this could be it if those do not happen.
And you know what? That's why we have you amazing ladies on our team, because you guys allow us to make sure that the verbiage is correct and that the package is correct in order to receive RFPs, because it does us no good to ask for a bunch of things if nobody's going to give us what we want. So I definitely like this, and I like that we did it as well with the permanent supportive housing, is we said, hey, we're going to allocate funding from this budget for this project. Please send us. So I move that we authorize staff to go out for an RFP and to find a funding source as our general fund, allocating up to $250,000 for the establishment of a safe parking site within the city limits of the city of Vista.
Thank you, Councilman Green. Councilwoman Contreras.
Thank you again for bringing this information forward. I have a question regarding some of the physical amenities. I'm going to ask a zoning question again. So do we need to do zone flips, or are we good with the zoning that we have?
This would require its own amendment.
Okay. And when it comes to some of the physical amenities, I'm seeing good lighting, fencing, restroom, hand washing, level ground, charging ports. Are there, restrooms that also have, showers?
That could be considered. That's really up to the provider to advise what they want, or up to council to say that's not something that we want there. So that's kind of, if looking for your direction of if your preference is, knowing also the price tag will increase depending on what services are available, or what's actually available at that particular site as well.
And does our current municipal code allow for portable showers at this time?
I don't believe so as well. So that would also take, just like with zoning, that would change the code as well. But we're looking for direction, what you want. I know the one in Encinitas currently does not have restroom facilities. The one that they did before had restrooms because it was something that was naturally there at the facilities. So those could be things to look at as well.
Okay, so if we did have a provider that wanted to provide additional amenity of showers without us amending our municipal code, that would not be a permissible use.
That's correct.
So, okay, I think as a council, we need to discuss our municipal code in regards to allowing showers, because there are some providers who do a really good job with that. So maybe that's a discussion for a future council. But I think that that's an important component, especially when you're looking at individuals who are working, that, as it was stated, the price of gas is astronomical. And even when it's not as high as this, it's still a big cost. And depending on vehicle maintenance and all that, if there's a provider who wants to provide additional amenities to help those consolidate the amount of spaces that they have to go to in order to just be ready for work in the morning, then I think that that's something that as a council we need to address in our municipal code. Outside of that, I am 100% in favor of a safe parking program and pursuing. I'm sure we can find the $250,000 somewhere in our budget And what I fear is it's really important to have this conversation out in the community, and I 100% support that. However, I don't want this to be months and months and months and months and months and months that go by, and then we're looking at 2023 when we're finally going to discuss whether or not, we want an RFP to go out or whatever the case might be. So I think it's important to ensure that we have a little bit of a tighter timeline. I want to ask my coworkers on staff what would be a good timeline to provide enough effort for community education and outreach and engagement on this topic, and then be able to come back to council where we can vote on moving forward to the next step.
Well, what we would, in a perfect world, we would look at engaging, currently there's 2 providers that do the safe parking, so we would want to have conversations with them to really kind of find out what would be a suitable site. And then at that time, it would probably be in best practice for us to go and identify that location, work with whatever, if it's public or if it's private, and then release the RFP with the identified site as well, and see if that's something that they would be able to, well, maybe the provider tells us they would like to go an opposite route. I can foresee us getting, and then through that development, we would develop the RFP. If we're bringing the RFP back to council following that, we're usually dark in July, so it would probably come back in August, and then 6 to 8 weeks for us to get it back and then select someone. So we're looking at something going in by the end of the year.
Okay, well, I wrote August vote with the little circle on my paper. So I think if that's the fastest we can do it, then that's the fastest we can do it. But I definitely want to ensure that it's no later than August that we're reviewing this again as a council to make a decision, especially because we're going to be going into, I mean, I know we're in Southern California, right? So it's like this weird combination of either it's super hot during that time or, a few months down the road, it could be really cold, right? So we want to make sure that we're addressing safe overnight parking with considerations of what the environment looks like as well, especially because we know it's going to get dark faster too, right? Maybe one day we can actually do something about daylight savings time and all this switch. But in any case, I think it's crucial that it doesn't take more than August for us to move forward, hopefully, at that point. Let's see. Okay, well, that's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Melendez and then Mayor Ritter.
Thank you. I am very supportive of this. I had initially brought it forward. And one of my strategies in bringing forward safe camping and safe parking is I figured they're going to go for one of these, okay? It's probably not going to be the safe camping, and it makes sense. It's not as urgent of a resource, but it's good to know that there is a precedent for safe camping being utilized as an emergency response, right? So as a city, if there is some sort of incident that results in, a high volume or just like a high increase of encampments, and there needs to be a coordinated effort to, get people into a safer environment, then that's good to know that, in a more emergency measure, that we still can utilize our space to accommodate people and their needs. But I think safe parking is going to be a really big benefit to the community. I know in my district, District 3, I'm seeing a particular area of a neighborhood that is being informally, and inappropriately used as a safe camping and safe parking street, right? Because it is, a little bit more secluded, a little bit more safe. And, right now in the community, there are people that are, utilizing their asset of a vehicle for their survival. And if we could give them a safer place to gather and find some rest so that they can have that, the leg up in the future, then that would be amazing. So I think that's all I have to say. I don't know if we have had a second on the motion, so I'll go ahead and second the motion to support staff's recommendation and the allocation of funding. Thank you.
Mayor Ritter?
Well, originally I voted against this, and I did because there was a precedent, and we had a bad experience with one in Vista. And but I'm not, I understand that, that maybe they've made a lot of improvements in ways they run them, and possibly there might be a way of doing it safely. But I'm going to reserve that until I hear where the location is and what the neighborhood, in that area that's identified feels like. If they're willing to accept it, then possibly I am willing to accept it. But at this point, I'm still not willing to accept that because of the bad experience that we had when we tried it as a city, several years back. And so that's kind of where I stand on it. So this time, for now, I'm going to not support it, but I'll keep an open mind. And if the right location came about and the city, the neighborhoods were supportive of that, then I would change my mind. So that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I shared your concerns, and I committed to visit the Jewish Family Services site in Encinitas, and I did, along with staff and Councilman Green, and I did see a parking lot that was very clean and very orderly, and the residents were not a detriment to the surrounding neighborhood. They were really pretty quiet. Most of them were asleep in their vehicles, and we were there relatively early in the evening. And while I do think there are still some significant challenges, the determination of location being the greatest of them, I will support moving forward with the RFP so that we can have the conversation and we can answer some of the difficult questions. And like you, Madam Mayor, I'll keep an open mind, but I do have some concerns and caveats. So with that, I think we have a motion and a second. So if you would, please cast your votes. And Madam Mayor, how shall we record your vote?
I'm going to vote no on this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that item passes with 4 in favor and 1 opposed.
And if I could make one comment before we continue, I do want to clarify earlier when we were talking about the permanent supportive housing, when you were asking about zoning, when I said there was no restrictions, there's no restrictions, as I think my words were, I didn't say them correctly. There's no restrictions with anywhere where multifamily would be developed. So, you can't just develop permanent supportive housing anywhere, but where we're looking to develop housing, there would be no restrictions of different zoning.
Okay, next is item D2, a preliminary review of the proposed specific plan amendment for multifamily housing at 1980 through 1990 University Drive. Community Development and Engineering Director John Connolly will provide the staff report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council. This is an advisory item this evening to review a proposal to change a specific plan in the North County Square Shopping Center. The site is shown here in the overhead. It is 1980 and 1990 University Drive, 2 parcels that includes about 6.3 acres. It's located within the North County Square specific plan. It's currently designated for commercial retail development, and it's currently developed with 2 commercial buildings and parking. You can see in the slide just a little below 60,000 square feet in size. These buildings are currently occupied by a furniture retailer and a fitness facility gymnasium. This is the larger view of the shopping center. You can see University Drive on the south side there, Sycamore Avenue over to the east side, which is the primary access to the freeway, and the SR 78 freeway to the south. And you can see the site there, which is at the west end of the shopping center. The applicant, in this case, SX Property Trust, has submitted a proposal to change the specific plan designation from commercial to multifamily residential at a density of 40 units to the acre. The proposal would include demolition of the existing 60,000 square foot of commercial buildings on the site. The proposal would develop up to 243 apartments in 7 separate 4-story buildings. It would include 478 on-site parking spaces and 114 off-site guest spaces with a tandem garage parking as part of the proposal. It includes a pool and clubhouse, some open space with a play area and dog run as some of the amenities that are proposed. And it is a market rate proposal with 6% of the units, or about 15 units, proposed as affordable at the low income category, which is 80% of AMI. This proposal would require an amendment to the North County Square specific plan, specifically Planning Area 8, where these 2 buildings are located. The North County Square specific plan currently permits primarily commercial retail and office uses, entertainment uses, restaurants. The proposal would change the permitted use on this property only to multifamily residential, 40 units to the acre. As this is a legislative request that would be at the council's discretion with a recommendation by the Planning Commission. This shows the location of Planning Area 8 within the North County Square specific plan, which would be the area that the zoning would be changed in. The remainder of the specific plan would stay as commercial designation. This is the applicant's proposal. They have a detailed presentation that will go over the proposal at hand. This is just to give you an idea of the site plan layout for the site, showing the arrangement of the 7 residential buildings and the leasing office, with a pool, clubhouse, and play area in the central portion of the site. You can see the parking around the periphery of the site and the garage spaces under the units on the ground floor. The images on the right are some of the architectural samples that the architect provided for context. As mentioned, this would require a specific plan amendment, which is at the discretion of the council with a recommendation by the commission. We bring all of these preliminary requests before the council for discussion. It is not a final decision, just direction for the applicant to consider their proposal any further. And at this time, staff's requesting that the council provide input to the applicant on the proposal at hand. And that completes my staff presentation. I'm available for any questions. The applicant does have a brief presentation as well.
Excellent, thank you, and we'll invite the applicant to come forward at this time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think we're going to get the slide presentation loaded up. I think they read it. Before I get started, I know there are 2 things I'd like to say. Number 1, I stand between you and dinner, so I take that very seriously, having not missed a lot of dinners myself. And number 2, we celebrated a birthday because I was born in 1963, as was the city of Vista. So look kindly on your brother Vince, please. I'm Vincent Mudd. I am the principal and market sector leader for Steinberg Hart Architects. It's a nationwide architectural firm. We have an office in San Diego that's been in San Diego for over 30 years. I'm here representing Essex Property Trust, and Raymond Tersini is with me, so Raymond can answer any questions that we need. And what I'll do is just kind of go through this presentation And I'll highlight a couple of items that I think are important for us to consider. As we know, we've looked at the site. A couple things about this site as well. There has always been a concern with residential properties and their potential for spillover into adjacent residential properties. I think in this particular site, because there is no parking on University Drive and the neighbor to the east is in fact the shopping center, which is also a partner in the deal with Essex, I think we probably do not have a spillover problem. There are a couple of items that we're asking for some relief on. Number one is the current zoning says that we can have a 45-foot high structure, but it says a 3-story structure. In order for us to make this work, we need, we'll stay within the 45 feet, but we need a 4-story structure because of how we're addressing the parking. And I'll talk about parking next. Also, just because this is a shopping center site, the setbacks in a shopping center site, a commercial site are different for a residential site, so we'd like some relief there. I'm going to skip the tandem parking for a second and just go to the next item, which is a request. We understand that City of Vista is very concerned about parking and not having enough parking for residents and their guests. We're not necessarily asking for you to change our parking requirements, but if you were to change the parking requirements, we're asking you to change them so that the 1-bedrooms only require 1 parking space. And if we're able to do that, we will not need the shared parking agreement next door. If we're not able to do that, we need the shared parking agreement for the property directly next door, and I'll talk about that. On the tandem parking and the tuck under parking, not everyone loves tandem parking and tuck under parking, but a challenge that we had on this site is even though the site looks to be large, you can see on the northern part of the site, that bank is 45 feet tall and it eats into the developable land that we have to get kind of a square or a rectangle below. So what's happened is in order to balance the density of the site, the parking requirements on the site, we had to use the tuck under parking to be able to avoid building a freestanding parking structure. I'll tell you why that's true. To build a freestanding parking structure to house over 572 parking spaces would be about a 6-story tall concrete and steel parking structure at a cost of about $17 million. And that would obviously be passed on to the rental cost of the unit. So we were trying to avoid that additional cost. And that's why we have the tandem tuck under. One other point about the tandem tuck under as well is there are 111 tandem parking spaces of the 500 plus parking spaces. So there'll be some people who have access to tandem, some people will have access to covered, and some people will have access to just traditional grade level. So it's a mix of parking, and we think that the tenants will work that out. In terms of where the property is at and some of these circular references, this is a half-mile arc drawn around the site to kind of show what's within that half mile, and the other arc is a 1.75-mile arc. And you see that at 1.75 miles in that arc, you pick up the transit station. In reality, the transit station is about 3/4 of a mile from the transit station by how the crow flies. The state of California uses 1/2 mile from transit as the measurement for TOD, transit-oriented development. So if we're using the state rules, which I think probably makes sense, we're not within that 1/4 mile arc. If we were using a 3/4, it would be a little bit more challenging. But I think we'd like to talk to you about that. We did operate going and looking at this project based on the information that was known to us at the time that we looked at the development, and at that time there was no inclusionary housing requirement in Vista. And so we were looking at the state requirements kind of as a backup to look at what we're gonna do. And we could talk more about that. We do have a draft traffic study, and what was good about the traffic study is there were concerns whenever you add 243 units, what the traffic impacts are going to be. But truthfully, since the retail use of the property has a more intense traffic need and traffic use, the residential will actually reduce the number of daily trips over what the current retail model is. So this may be the first project that you talk to that someone says that we're actually going to reduce traffic. Go figure that. Also, the other two items on there relate to the screening and some of the other issues that we can talk further about. Why this site? This site is interesting because we have to protect the retail in Vista for a number of reasons, and we have to also create a place for the workforce to live. We think this site actually gives us both of those in a very positive way. The workforce who live here and the families that live here will have access to the freeway. Many of the folks that live here are going to turn right when they exit University Drive and get on the 78. And we think that that's going to be very positive for the site. Also, we believe that by having 243 units with over 500 plus people there, we think that those residents will also help keep the shopping center thriving and growing on a long-term basis. So we think all in all, this is a high and best use for a mixed-use development site and a very sustainable model for others to look at. This image here is showing that area, that shared parking area I mentioned. So if you look at the number of parking spaces that we need based on what the City of Vista is asking for, we can fit all the resident housing, our parking requirements. It's just some of the guest parking don't fit on the site. And so that's why we have this shared parking area that's around 114 or so parking spaces. If we did get the ability to have one parking space required for the one-bedroom units, the project, half of the project is one-bedrooms. And so you figure that's 120 fewer parking spaces that would be required on the site, and we wouldn't need the shared parking. So that's the reason why that exists. As you can see with the site is a Rubik's Cube. It's a tight site. To get that much parking on the site, you really do have somewhat of a compressed site to look at. And although we're not happiest with the way it lays out, unfortunately, as you turn that Rubik's Cube, this was the best yield for that particular site. I mentioned earlier that if it is possible to build the large parking structure to get all that parking on site, but what would happen is the actual structure would dominate the site itself, and we would lose the open space. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, you're asking for 60,000 square feet of open space. We believe we have about 70,000+, and we thought that was important to make this is a home. This is where people are going to live and spend their lives, and we think that open space is a very positive element. We did have some conversations with some members of the community. They wanted to make sure we did have a place for children to play, and some other items that we've also looked at. Number one, that little green dot up at the very top right was just to figure out that we do need a dog run of some type on the property, just to make sure that we allow people a place to go and the animals to relieve themselves. In reality, that's where the fire, the fire path of travel is, so we would move that little green color to wherever it actually works ultimately. I think I mentioned that half of the project are one bedrooms and the other half are 2 and 3. So this is a place for families to live. And then also you mentioned earlier that even though there was no requirement for inclusionary housing at the time we started this project, we did, the developer, Essex, did say that they would look at 6%. They're not seeking any state funding or federal funding or any subsidies. This is all market rate financed, and that's one of the reasons why it's a little challenging on the affordable side to have that number go up much higher than that, but we can talk about that. On these, this image really was, as Mr. Connolly said, to show kind of what the massing of that four-story building looks like and what the parking looks like in the tuck-under model. And as I said earlier, there's 111 tandem parking spaces. So it's a combination of tandem, tuck-under, covered, and grade level parking. But it does give you a sense of what that mass is. The purpose of this slide was to show where the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms were located in the site. The site we haven't fully done all the development, design, and architecture, so this might change, but it does give you a sense of how the property lays out for families. Somebody really likes this slide up there. See, I clicked this like 13 times, so when it does work, it'll go right to the end. Are you clicking it? Okay. Ooh. Let us say, I can dance. You don't want to see it. I can sing too, and you don't want to hear it. So we probably want this thing to open up soon, right? But while it is spinning, I think one thing I think we have a willingness to do, and Essex has a willingness to do. Essex is a buy and hold developer. What that means is Essex will take the project from entitlement and permit. They will get the project built, and they will manage and maintain the property long term. They're not flipping this property. They will manage it. I know there was a question earlier about kind of the quote unquote CC&Rs and the rental agreements and what people who live here will be bound by. Essex will actually make sure that the neighborhood is clean and safe and well organized. Another comment that was made earlier was with one of the groups that we met in the community was a concern about safety and security. This particular site at night gets pretty dark when the retail closes. We believe that when we add the residential, you're going to be activating the site. As everyone knows, if you don't activate an empty piece of land, bad things happen. So we're going to activate the site, and we think it'll be well lit, and we think it'll be a safe neighborhood for people to live in. So we think that security concern that's currently going on in that area, we believe we may be able to address that. And so as it's coming back up,
So the council has the architecture in their packet. They do have slides of all the architectural, and it's also in the staff report.
Yeah, I think the slide that would have come up would have shown the massing of the buildings and also would have shown the proximity of the buildings to its neighbor, the academy, the classical academies, showing how the 45-foot building, although that bank I mentioned was between 41 and 45 feet, it will extend a little bit into their view corridor, but we don't think it will be massive. We do think that if we were going back and had to add significant density to the project, we'd be talking about maybe a 60-foot tall building that may have some additional impacts. But the last slide, which was going to show or second last slide showed the kid area, the pool area, which I thought developed actually quite well. That particular part of the property is the safest part of the property because you can see how it's got the leasing building in front of it, it's got the other buildings flanking it, and the other building to the north of it. And we think it'll be a very safe place for children to play. And also we think those buildings will block some of the sound from the 78 freeway. So it might even be, I wouldn't say a quiet area because that's a lot of kids playing there, but at least it'll be one of the more protected areas on the project site. As you look at the drawings, the architecture is not finished. It's preliminary, it's conceptual, but we did want you to see that it was a little more contemporary of a building because the shopping center itself is kind of rectilinear, and they're going to be doing some improvements in the shopping center. So we wanted to make sure we could try to be consistent with some of those improvements. So that's why that style looks like that. And this image, like I said, the other thing about this image is it shows that if you know the outlet, you know that the last building, our building that's furthest north, the one on the bottom page to the far right, is about 100, it's over 100 feet away from the Classical Academy building, meaning that whereas the current outlet is closer and has greater visual impact, we're pulled back from that. So once again, we think that large open space will improve the visual impact on the site. And then lastly, these are just showing some of the imagery that you have in your package. I would say this last comment was, we did have someone in the community that we looked at, and they were looking for more grass, more grassy areas. I served on the Water Authority Board, so I know that we're either going to design xeriscape landscaping, or we're going to be required to do it because there just isn't any water out there. So we decided to make sure that we showed a design that we thought would be consistent with what the Water Authority would require of any large project user. And lastly, that's our play area for the kids and the families. And with that, if there are any other questions, I've got Raymond here with me, and we can answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a member of the community who's would like to make a comment. Nancy Oshley.
Good evening, council members and Mayor, Madam, up on the screen there. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm a D1 resident, and I'm neutral on this project. I think it's actually probably a good idea. We all know that parking lot, we all take our kids there, learn how to drive their first time because it's always so vacant during the day. So probably a multifamily housing project is a good idea, except it's not very pedestrian friendly if you want to go to the Buena Vista station. In fact, I typed into Google, like, just how long would it take to get there, and it actually takes you way over the hill and then hooks you back to the station, and that's because Robolini is so unsafe. So I would suggest that we ask the developer, and maybe even Sandag, if they could look at some sort of way to make that, safer for people. I mean, I hate driving through there when there are pedestrians. I mean, I've seen people even on wheelchairs along Robolini, and I'm surprised that there haven't been more accidents. I know a lot of the homes there have had lots of mailboxes and things like that run into. So I don't know. I mean, it's a big ask, but I think that's a lot of people living in that place, and probably a lot of them will want to use mass transit. So anyway, that's just it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Contreras.
All right. Thank you, Nancy, for your comments. And, when it comes to our commercial space, it is valuable. So when we have a developer that wants to come in and perhaps give a better purpose and higher value to a site that could use it. This site in particular, I think fits that criteria. However, I do have some comments regarding a few things. One, I have a question for the developer regarding the shared parking. Is the shared parking, is that an increase in costs if you needed the shared parking, or how does that work?
Yeah, it would be most likely an increase in cost. We haven't finalized any negotiations with the neighboring property, but it would most likely be a cost to the project.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I mean, it's a lot of parking spaces, 478 on-site parking spaces, 114 off-site. I'll get back to that in a second. Looking at the proposal for 6% affordable at low income being at kind of more the top of low income, 80% AMI. I think that's a good start. It's not enough. I'm just not supportive of a project of this size at that amount of affordable units, approximately 15. I could, however, see myself being very supportive of lowering the on-site parking requirements if we were able to achieve a greater percentage of affordable units, even if we kept it at 6% affordable at low income of 80% AMI, and maybe we can get to 15% affordable income units if we did another 9% at 120% AMI, because we do have a workforce that has a hard time finding a place to live that's affordable, and then people entering the workforce that it might be good for them. They don't have a family, right? They could take one of these smaller units. Perhaps they are working at Business Park, right? It's a really close drive to the Business Park. Drive versus time that you're in the car because of traffic, right? It's two different things, but proximity is there. But yeah, I just, at this point, with only 6% being at 80% AMI affordable at this low income that's a little bit higher on the spectrum of affordable, it's just not enough. But I'm super flexible when it comes to increasing the amount of affordable units and taking a look at some of these other requirements that we have for the project. I'm amendable to changing some of them. I do think it's 100% important to have open space, even if the green space itself has to be water smart, right? We have Coast Live Oaks. They provide a lot of shade, and they actually inhibit a lot of grass growth under their canopy. And they're really good at collecting their own water too. That's why the leaves have like this little pointy little ridge on them. But anyways, that's a whole other story. So I think there's a way to do open space where we're using site-suitable native California plants that can produce a really nice aesthetic, especially when it comes to the dog run. I'm thinking about, even our dog park in the way that it is. We don't have a bunch of grass, but we do have a lot of tree coverage there with California native plants. So I think that's it for now. I want to hear from the rest of my colleagues. Thanks.
Councilwoman Melendez.
Thank you. Thank you for the updates. I know we spoke a bit ago, and I had been one of the members that was concerned about making sure that regardless of the parking requirements, that there was absolutely needed to be an area for children to play. And I think it looks great. I think this play area and the way that it's designed and oriented in the space is really good. I'm really happy to see that. When it comes to the parking challenges, I am very flexible, right? When we're looking at some of these more dense, newer developments, the higher value is right in those units and not necessarily in securing all of the parking that we anticipate a family might need. So I think that there is a creative solution that you're suggesting regarding the single bedroom units that those could have lower parking requirements due to the fact that there will be fewer tenants there since they are one-bedroom units. So I would be definitely open to that. I agree with Councilmember Contreras that if this is going to be a development for that's, that you're identifying is for the workforce and for working families, then there needs to be more affordable housing. I agree that it could take on a look of 120% AMI. That way it's, not as intensely, it's not as intensely lower cost for the renter, but it would still meet that need. And then I also had a question regarding proximity to transit and that, 3/4 of a mile. I know that in our recent discussions regarding inclusionary housing, there was, an expressed interest in having requirements for inclusionary housing within 3/4 of a mile. And I don't know if we take any consideration into the infrastructure, right? So if the infrastructure isn't accessible to get to those transit areas, then does that extend the proximity, right? Does it mean it's further away? Nancy, I appreciate you bringing up Robolini. I was just driving on Robolini today to visit my parents, and every year it gets crazier and crazier. So there needs to be something done there that's actually going to keep people safe, because whether it's, residents of this development or, just anyone in that area, being able to access South Santa Fe through Robolini is really important. So Mr. Conley, would you be able to explain a little bit about how our inclusionary housing discussion relates to this development, specifically that 3/4 of a mile?
Yeah, so I'm pressing the button. This site is 3/4 of a mile from the transit center, almost exactly, but as the crow flies.
Okay.
So there would be, if you measured it as you drive or walk, it would be further. The issue with Robolini and safety getting to the transit center is really largely, unfortunately, on the county right now because the city boundary's at the 7-Eleven. The county does have a plan to extend Sycamore and connect to Buena Creek and create a pedestrian connection. They've had it on their capital projects list for years, but it's unfunded. So unless we do something, or this developer does, it's unlikely it's going to happen in the near future.
Right. And, I'm not suggesting that you be responsible for fixing Robolini, right? That's a big improvement that needs to be made. But in regards to this space, I think that the update to our commercial spaces like this development would be a game changer for our community. I think this is going to be the best use of some of our commercial spaces going forward, that they're more oriented towards those working families, that they're integrated into these different shopping areas, that they're close to schools, they're close to transit. I think it's a really, really beautifully designed model of a community. And in order for it to meet the needs of the community, especially working families, there has to be more affordable units. So I'm not, necessarily claiming how many that needs to be, but in order for me to feel comfortable going forward with something like this, I would have to see that.
If I can comment just on that 1/4 mile.
Please.
The reason why it's probably important for the City of Vista to use the 1/4 mile standard is because that's the standard used by the state, and that's the standard currently being used by at least 13 cities I know of in San Diego. And you wouldn't want to put Vista in a competitive disadvantage when developers are looking at developing in your city because we're using a standard that might not be the same. So that's kind of and many of those cities have similar infrastructure challenges, as you can imagine the entire state does. So I would caution that the 1/4 mile standard is probably a good standard, not just because we just happen to be 7.43 of a 1/4 of a mile, but I think it's probably the best way for you to work. Thank you.
I appreciate that perspective, and I do want our policies to be consistent, right, with the rest of the market. And if we were to go forward with an inclusionary housing policy that was a half mile versus 3/4 of a mile, which we previously discussed as a body here in the city of Vista, then it would still need to have more affordable units. So that's going to continue to be my perspective. When it comes to our inclusionary housing policy, that is, somewhat divorced from this conversation, but it does kind of influence, how do we consider this location in the scope of the rest of the city where we're looking at an inclusionary housing ordinance. Regardless of an inclusionary housing ordinance or not, I would still advocate for more affordable units at this location. I understand that the financing for deed-restricted affordable units could be difficult, and we can absolutely talk about that. However, if it is a requirement, then it would be for high community benefit, and that would be my priority. So that's all the comments that I have, but I appreciate you coming and sharing updates. Like I said, I really wanted to see a play area, and I think this is fantastic, and I definitely want to see more. Thanks.
Councilman Joe Green.
Was the mayor first? I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You think I was? Okay. Hi, Madam Mayor. I was just trying to be considerate because you don't get to be in the line here, okay? Anyway. Good. That sounds great. That's a really loud microphone, just so you know it's loud coming through over there. All right. Thank you so much for presenting this project. We did obviously speak about this project, and I appreciate it. Love working with different minds. Goodness, I didn't even think about 120% AMI considering affordable. So let's check this out, developer guys. You ready? AMI right now is right about 96 grand in San Diego County, right? So 80% of the AMI is $76,800 a year. If we made 6% of your units 80% of the AMI, that's 14.58 units. Quick math, right? My councilwoman's idea, or both council member women ideas, were that we also add additional affordable units at 120% AMI. Well, 120% AMI is $115,200 per year, my friends. So $115,000 per year is, almost $10,000 per month, a little over $9,000 a month. I don't know how much you're planning on renting out these properties for, but I would think some of your market rate rentals are going to be right at about 120% AMI as well. But I like the idea of capping an additional 6% at 120% AMI. So something that I would be supportive of, and let me first caveat this with the why, okay? You're asking for something, right? Lots of things, let me tell you about them. We're asking for us to lower the parking requirement. You're asking me to raise the stories to 4 instead of 3. You're asking me to rezone my general plan, which why do we have a general plan if we're gonna keep rezoning it? And you're asking me to allow your tandem parking. I'm not a fan personally of tandem parking. We could talk to the other people about it, but in order for us to allow all of that stuff, I feel like we need something too. And as far as the council's concerned, this whole meeting, a lot of it has been based off of attainable housing and affordable housing and market rate housing and all of that. So this is a great time for your project to come forward, in my opinion. And I think if we put numbers forward that work with your numbers, I'm not saying that your people aren't actually going to be qualifying to pay rent. They shouldn't need subsidies. At 120% AMI, their debt to income ratios should qualify just fine. But what I don't want to happen is have people that are, making a whole, way too much money written all of those, and nobody that's a median income earner or a workforce housing earner able to attain these, because we would rather see somebody making 400 grand a year than 115 grand a year. Does that make sense? So I don't think that's an unrealistic overlay to put on them. If you're asking me to raise your stories and lower parking, I would be a lot more susceptible to that if you did the overlay to affordable housing like that. We keep your 6% you already agreed to, and then we add another 6% with the 120% AMI, which is basically 12% affordable and median level housing. So it's a mix of both in your development. If you did that, then I would be amenable to taking that parking requirement down on your run bedrooms. You help me a little bit, I would help you. But I am not a huge fan of this tandem parking, and I think I talked to you about it as well, is I'm assuming there are going to be people who are sharing a unit, but a lot of times people leave at different times of the morning. I leave at 4:30 in the morning sometimes, well, pretty regularly, and my wife doesn't leave until 7 or 8, and sometimes that switches where I take the kid and she takes the kid. I just think it's very inconvenient from a tandem parking standpoint that it still requires both people to move in some cases. And if there is any way to get rid of tandem parking and still park this properly, I would like that. We don't have any tandem parking really within the city of Vista that I'm aware of, Mr. Conley, or no, we don't? And do we have anything in our code that says we can't do tandem parking?
No, it's silent on that. We have a couple tandem spaces on some of the newer projects that are open, but nothing in garages.
And this is tandem parking within a garage? Yeah. Okay. So I think a 2-car garage should be a 2-car garage. Anytime I'm out looking at houses and they say, hey, this is a 3-car garage and it's a 2-car with a tandem spot, people are disappointed just because it's not as, usable as a parking space. So I even think if it was a tandem garage, the front half would probably be used for storage because pulling 2 cars in and out of a tandem garage is a real pain, personally. So I'm definitely okay telling you to go forward. Obviously, you need to crunch the numbers and figure out, what it would take. But I'm not opposed to making, some changes to my general plan and some changes to my parking restrictions if you're willing to provide housing that I can tell my community is either attainable or affordable. And I think capping the income guidelines at 120% AMI and kind of calculating that as attainable housing for the community is fantastic. If there's any way to do a local resident preference on that housing, I would love it as well. Not a requirement, hey, but a local resident preference would be great. 12%, 6% affordable, 6% at 120 AMI. If you live in Vista and work in Vista, you get first preference. You're not guaranteed a spot at our establishment. And we want to do something special about tandem parking. Show me new designs. That's my take on it. I know we're not making a motion on it, but I do encourage you to go forward because like my council, those 2 retail buildings you had in there, there's not a lot of traffic, man. If they were crushing it, they probably wouldn't want to, move out. So I don't think traffic-wise it's going to be a huge benefit per se because people aren't rushing to the RBC outlet and that gym over there that I've seen at least. But I do think this is the most practical use for this lot. And I think that if we can show our community that, yes, we are making some changes and some concessions for this developer, but they're going to buy this, they're going to hold it, they're going to maintain it, they're going to keep it beautiful, and they're going to ensure that we house some Vistans and some nice properties with some awesomely functional garages. Thank you so much. That's all I got.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, am I talking really loud?
Your volume is fine, Mayor.
Joe says I'm talking really loud, so I don't want to talk really loud and scare everybody. Okay, here's what I have to say. I took notes here. So I'm not willing to lower the parking in the 1 bedrooms to 1 single spot because most likely 2 people are going to live in that 1 bedroom and they're both going to have cars because they're probably both going to be working. So the apartments around town that were built before we had these parking, the number of parking that we have now. Look at the streets outside of those parking units, and the streets are always full with parking, and so I don't want to see that again. And so, but I do like the off-site parking is okay as long as it's codified in the deed, and so so later on they don't come and take that away. But I don't like the tandem parking. Councilmember Green said it well. I think it'll end up being storage. Just, one car will pull in and then in front of that will be a bunch of storage. I think I don't like tandem, and I don't know how you can fix that, but I would fix that. I don't like the tandem parking at all. Talking about the affordable housing, whatever units are affordable means that the cost has to go somewhere. It has to be pushed into the other units. So you can increase the affordable units and then the other units are going to have to pay more. I don't know who pays for that. It isn't, the developer's not going to absorb that cost. So you guys can make, as much affordable housing as you want to, but then the other units are going to be more expensive. And so I don't support that. I don't mind having having them pay like a fee in lieu of affordable housing. That goes into an account that also helps with other affordable units. But I don't want to raise the parking on the other units in there. So I think housing is affordable, as expensive enough as it is right now. I don't know how we can keep raising the price of apartments and things. I just think that's too much. So, and the other thing is, it'll be mostly, I would think, working people, because it's not close to the transit center, so they're going to have cars. I don't see a lot of people walking to that, even though, and I know Robolini's awful, but I don't see a lot of these people walking to that transit center. And it's not, and I don't know if it's a transit center, or is it just the, I don't know if the buses all go there too, or if it's just the train that the Sprinter that goes there. So that's pretty much, those are my comments. So that I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Mr. Connolly, let's see, I lost my question. Let me ask Mr. Mudd about some of the building materials on the outside of the building. It looks like in some of the renderings that it might be corrugated metal.
It's a combination. Well, we haven't finalized the design, but we know it'll be either a hardy board or some other material offset from the stucco. So it can, because Essex is a buy and hold owner, it'll have to be a material that's going to be able to survive that kind of 25-year cycle before it gets redone. So it'll be a high quality material that is highly resistant to damage and age.
So I would just point out that at this point in the process, this is what we call the early design review, and I'm just giving this for the benefit of the community that's watching tonight. This is, in the past, a developer would spend 1.5 years, 2 years developing a project to come before the Planning Commission and then the City Council and find out whether or not we were in favor of it or not and how we felt about it. And we realized that we had the cart ahead of the horse, and so we've established this early design review process to give you guidance at the very outset and to give the community an opportunity to be heard on the project at the very outset of the project. So I always like to mention that because a lot of folks think we're making a final decision tonight. We are not. That's why we're not making a vote. We're just giving direction to you about what our feelings are. I'm not opposed to the tandem parking, but I absolutely agree. I would be storing things in it. I lived in an apartment in Vista when I first moved to Vista. And when I first moved into it, I was by myself, and I parked my car in the parking area, and I had my garage entirely full of my belongings. And then I got married, and my wife moved in, and we had 2 cars. So we were using 3 parking spots for a 1-bedroom. But I know that's not everybody's situation. I'm willing to be flexible on the parking, and here's why. There's no legal parking on the street in any of the adjacent streets, right? So
Correct.
the ability for your parking issue to spill onto the adjacent streets really isn't existent. And because you do have a giant relief valve, I call it the ocean of parking there at North County Square, I'm always moved by taking Grand Plaza and overlaying it over top of North County Square and realizing how much additional parking that really denied that center of its nexus, but we required it many years ago. So I think we all want to see some more retail options, infill, and would work with the owner who was here but left maybe. Oh, there he is. To see some more of those. And I think that's part of the hope, is that by having some more consumers in that area, that we have some more shopping and dining opportunities, and that the businesses that are there will succeed. Mr. Conley, I remember what I was going to ask. It was about the watering of the, is there any statewide or regional prohibition on turf at multifamily developments?
It's limited to a small percentage of the landscaping based on their water usage. So they can use turf, but they have an overall water allowance that they have to use for the project.
Well, I don't know if you can make it work, but I mean, if 500 people can't have a little bit of grass, I mean, grass is cooler. There's nothing that you can construct, wood chips and used, ground up tires, and there's nothing you can do to make a cooler play surface than grass, and for families to have a little bit of something green to look at. And, if we were talking about, my backyard, that's one thing, but this is 500 people sharing it. They ought to be able to have a little bit of greenery. So I'm not telling you what I'm asking you to do, but I'm just saying, if 500 people can't share a little bit of something green, then I think the world's upside down. So I hope you'd give some thought to that. I'm not a fan of corrugated metal on the outside of projects, and I know it's industrial chic, but I just don't like the look of it. And if there's, I don't know if you have any exposed concrete block. We did something recently with some exposed concrete block, and I was really shocked by how much I didn't like the look of it. It wasn't something that was a step up. It felt like a step down in the appearance. So some of those coatings that, treatments on the outside of the building, I think are really important for the aesthetic of the building. We do have a lot of really beautiful architecture in the area, so I want you to think about maybe some of those ideas. That said, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and some of the project's owners several times and talk this through and address some of the concerns. And I also would advise you to move forward through the process and bring this back to the community. Community is going to have several additional opportunities to be heard on this before it is finally adopted, and I would encourage you to work with the neighbors and the community, and I would encourage the community to come forward and be heard on this. Councilman Joe Green.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for your presentation, sir. Just a couple things that I wanted to clarify. Number one, you said that maybe we shouldn't increase our inclusionary overlay because it may put us at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to developers. I'd like to think land is a commodity, and that in Vista, we don't have a lot of land left, and that if we want to put overlays on our land, eventually somebody will comply with them per se. I don't think we're at a competitive disadvantage with anything that we put in because we have a fantastic community here that developers want to come to. And, I tell people we're like Low Brooklyn right now, man. We're popping and hopping. But one thing that I did want to present to you, because you said that might put us at a competitive disadvantage, is I wanted you to just, kind of look into that in lieu fee that Madam Mayor talked about and present to me what exactly the financial hindrance would be to you to add an additional 6% overlay with 120% AMI. Because I would think if you're renting 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms out there and these guys are making $115,000 per month, 120% AMI, they should be able to pay almost market rate. All I'm trying to do is limit the level of income that you're approving to be something manageable to a Vista resident. However, if you think that $115,000 per year is an adequate income to qualify for your development and it's going to cost you a bunch of money, then what would an acceptable in lieu fee be to you as a developer that wouldn't put us at a competitive disadvantage, if that makes sense? Because I really want to know, because for me, somebody making $115,000 a year that wants to rent an apartment is an amazing candidate, just as good of a candidate who's making $400,000 per year. And I don't think that should cost you more money by just designating 14.58 of 243 units as, that particular thing. So I'd like to know that.
Raymond's got an answer.
Raymond's your man. All right, Raymond.
Yeah, no, we're happy to look into that and see the impacts of it. Part of when you increase inclusionary housing on a market rate developer, it helps or hurts the financeability of the project down the road. If we want to get permanent financing, if we want to restructure the deal, having any units that are deed restricted, it does impact the development. But I understand what you're asking.
Yeah, and
happy to look into it.
Of course, and the other thing was I understood you to be a build and hold developer.
We are.
So it's not like we're trying to sell this to somebody else or anything. Like, you're going to keep it forever, is my understanding. So like, if we put together a package with you as the builder and the developer who's going to keep it and make this beautiful for our community, then I feel like that should be a non-issue. But yeah, please look into it and let me know. And if I'm developer friendly. We want people to build in Vista. We want you to come here. But at the same token, you're asking for a lot of things, and I need to be able to explain to my citizens that I put your feet to the fire and I tried to get as much for Vista as I could before I rolled over for a big bad developer to come put a bunch of expensive housing inside my house, inside my city. Does that make sense?
Yep. Not
Yes,
the first
sir.
time I'm called a big bad developer.
And I think you guys are nice, happy developers. And Bill, Thank you so much for bringing this North County Square to our city. As a kid who grew up in Vista, when Walmart came in and all this cool stuff came in, and knowing that we had a place to go shopping, probably 40% of my AMI is spent in that area over there. And Biggie's Burgers is right across the street over there now. Their shakes and cheeseburgers are money. So what you've brought to Vista is huge, and you're bringing something else awesome to Vista. And I don't discount what you bring and what you mean to our city, sir. So I appreciate you, jumping through our hoops, telling us your blood type, being available for a bone marrow transplant or whatever it is, and just knowing that we want to work with you, but we have a responsibility to the citizens, and that's why you hear us all, be so hesitant to make these changes. But I like where you're going with it. I think you've heard from us, and thanks for your time and willingness to develop in our city.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, with that, that's the conclusion of this item, and that'll take us to our oral communications. And we don't have any requests to speak, and seeing none, we have no speakers this evening. That brings us to our council remarks, and let's start with Councilwoman Melendez.
Nothing to add this evening. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Councilwoman Contreras.
Thank you so much for the incredible discussion and the community participation at this meeting. And if you want to talk a little bit more about it, anything happening in Vista, you can join me and we can talk and pick up trash at the same time. That's 9 a.m. to 9:15 at Luz Duran Park. We have everything you need to be able to pick up trash, and I look forward to seeing you there. Other than that, I'm really hungry, so I can't wait to get some food.
Okay, Councilman Joe Green.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much for your presentation. Greatly appreciated. If any of you need nourishment before you go pick trash up at 9 a.m., you can find me at Pegasus Cafe in Vista every morning at 7 a.m. with the Kiwanis Club, and I'll buy you bacon and maybe some eggs and some water so you have the energy to pick up trash with Councilmember Contreras. I also wanted to just give a huge shout out to Twice on Main. The owner is Natalie Trevino. It's a nice little boutique shop that we have here in Vista. We had our badge pinning ceremony, and I want to say 38 firefighters received badge pins. 35, look at that. Maybe 3 more will get them very soon. Anyway, while we were there, they came across the street. They were so excited all of us Vistans were there, and Logan, her son, made these awesome little Vista necklaces, and I know you can't necessarily zoom in on it with that amazing camera, but this is the coolest necklace I've ever got. There's no diamonds in it or anything, but it's a map of Vista pressed under some cool little stones, super artsy. And if you need one of these, because I need more of them, check them out on Twice Main, man. We got a lot of cool shops, and this shop's awesome, and those people love our community. And when I'm wearing a t-shirt cruising through Vista, I'll be wearing this, and I'll let you know where I got it. Have a great night. We got great taco options in the city of Vista. Mr. Mudd, thank you for allowing me to get out of here before 9 o'clock for my tacos. Happy Taco Tuesday. Madam Mayor.
Thank you for being patient with me. I apologize if I talk too loud. I can't judge that from the area, but I'm happy to be here tonight, and thank you for letting me do that.
Your volume was perfect. Okay, now we're going to start at the other end with our Assistant City Clerk, Claire Lopez, City Clerk Kathy Valdez, City Attorney Darrell Piper.
Nothing to add?
And City Manager Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Need to figure out how to work the system. Wanted to just tell everybody that the City of Vista is still hiring for summer jobs. We have a desperate need for jobs in our recreation division at the Wave Water Park in particular, the Moodline Amphitheater, as well as recreation. So if you know anybody of any age that's looking for some part-time summer employment, we'd appreciate hearing from them. You can go to cityofvista.com and just click on the /summer jobs to get more information. And I wanted to say thank you to Chris Mitchell, who is our IT manager, as well as the Western AV team for redoing the audio and video in the council chambers. It worked pretty well for our first go-around tonight, and the video quality is exceptional. So you're gonna see a tremendous difference on the YouTube channel for customers that are watching the video. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, I think as you all know, Andrea McCullough, who is our communications officer and who is in the back there, after 14 years of serving Vista, is leaving us for the desert. She has never been there in the summer, so she doesn't know what she's getting into, but she's heading out to the Coachella Valley Water District to be their communications officer and run their department. So I just want to say congratulations to Andrea. She's been a great asset to Vista, a great team member, a great friend, and she's done a great job branding us as a city, taking care of all of our social media needs, being that calm and steady influence that we need. And so thank you, Andrea, and just want to publicly say that and wish you the best in your future career in Coachella.
Okay, thank you. And also thank you to the 34 I Love a Clean San Diego Vista volunteers. This past Saturday, the volunteers collected a total of 1,080 pounds of trash and 60 pounds of recyclables. Thank you to them. This Saturday, April 30th, at the Vista Library, a free legal aid clinic will be held from noon to 6 p.m. Attorneys will assist with immigration, criminal, civil, family, and other matters. National Take Back Day is also Saturday, April 30th. It is a day that provides a safe way to dispose of prescription drugs. The Vista drop-off location is at the North County Regional Center Courthouse from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. that Saturday. Check the City of Vista website calendar for details at thecityofvista.com. And finally, this brings us to adjournment. And today, we'd like to adjourn in honor of Mike McFadden, who sadly passed away on March 28th. Mike served as a City of Vista fire inspector from 2011 to 2022. Prior to that, he served the City of San Diego as a paramedic, the City of Carlsbad Fire Department, where he rose to the rank of battalion chief, and Mercy Air as a flight paramedic. He was also an instructor at Palomar College for 20 years. Mike will be remembered for his exceptional work ethic, positive attitude, and selfless acts. He will be dearly missed. We're adjourned. Thank you.